Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Hi guys, I really miss every single one of you, and I really hope that you are getting to enjoy this weather. I know there could be still homework and online classes, but I think it's a bit warmer so that maybe you could go out after your classes and just play and enjoy this beautiful weather outside. Today we will be talking about David, and I'm not too sure if we can call him a friend, probably a friend, but his name is Mephibosheth. Very long name, so I am just going to call him M throughout the whole lesson because it is a very long name, but his name is Mephibosheth. Very long. Okay. So the verse that I would like you to keep in mind throughout this whole lesson is, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. And that is Romans 12:20. Okay? And the lesson that we will be talking about today is a reference from 2 Samuel 21. So 2 Samuel chapter 21. Okay. So some questions that I want you to keep in mind. Have you ever seen a blind man walking across the street or trying to get across? Or have you ever seen someone who is, handicapped and they're trying to go from one place to the next? Maybe in the supermarket, maybe also crossing the street. Have you also, I'm sure you guys in your school, have you seen, a lot of kids who broke their legs, broke their arms, and sometimes they cannot, move as easy as you, right? Sometimes they cannot walk, sometimes they cannot write, especially if they're right-handed and they break their right arm. So all of that to keep in mind when we're talking about this lesson, because M, the person who was in this story, he was also handicapped. He could not walk. And the whole objective of this is, if you're ever seeing someone who is in need, don't ever think that you cannot help, or don't just step back. If you can help, do, because Christ would always love you to help and to love others with your help. So with this, let's just start the story a bit. So we know David the shepherd, and the famous story of David is when he killed Goliath. Now, after that, a bit after, there was King Saul at the time when David was there, before David became king, and Saul did not like David a lot, right? To the point where he actually wanted to kill him. And David knew that. David knew that Saul did not like him, and he wanted him killed. Okay. So David became king, and that's after Saul's death, and most likely it would just be like, well, thank God, David can live, and now he can live his life, and he doesn't have to think about Saul anymore, and probably if there's anybody left from his family, he'd probably just kick them out of the kingdom. That's what we think David was going to do. But David did the exact opposite. After Saul's death, David, with him being king at the time, he actually asked one of his servants to look for anyone in Saul's family. And the servants were very surprised. They're like, why would you want to do that? Do you want to kill them? Why would you want to do that? Well, David was like, I actually want to show kindness to them. I want to see if there's anything that I can do to help. They were very surprised. They were like, but Saul did not like you and he wanted you to be killed. But David just disregarded that. And he kept remembering the verse of, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. So after the servant questioned him a couple of times, he was like, no matter what, Saul was the king, and I still want to show kindness to anyone who was a relative of the king's. So the servant was, all surprised, but he obeyed the king because David was the king. Now, just a little bit of review because I don't want to talk a lot and you guys would be forgetting what I'm saying. So first of all, David was the king. The name of the king before him was King Saul, who was his enemy because he wanted David killed. David was a good-hearted man by wanting to find any one of Saul's relatives to show him kindness and to possibly give him money and help him if he's in need. And the verse that he remembers about love is, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. That's what David wanted to do. Okay? Now, The servant kept searching for Saul's, relatives, if he had a son, if any one of his relatives was still alive, and he find the guy named Mephibosheth, who is just M in this case. Now, when he found M, he was like, "The king wants you right now. You have to come with me." And M was very scared. He was like, "But I'm a good person. I know my father wanted to kill him, but I don't. And I just, want to live peacefully. I don't want any trouble. So please don't take me to him because I did not do anything wrong. And if my father had a problem with him, I don't." But the servant was like, "No, he actually wants to help you." Now M was even more surprised. Why would David want to help him? Okay, his father wanted to kill David, but the most logical thing is just leave the whole family alone, like don't even get associated with them. But David was like, "No, like I actually want to help these people." Okay. And then he realized that M was actually a lame, which means he could not walk. So he was always walking with canes. So to bring M to David, the servant had to carry M throughout the whole way. Now, this is the part where if you're seeing someone who is in need, you do help him, right? So the servant did not just leave M and be like, "Okay, you are Saul's son, I'm not gonna help you." No, he still helped him and he carried him all the way through. So, let's see. So secretly, when the servant brought M back to David and he was talking to King David at the time, he was like, "Are you sure you want to help this man? Like his father was still your enemy. He wanted you killed." David was like, "No, I still want to care for him. He is lame, meaning he cannot walk. Who would care for him? He cannot do anything by himself because he cannot walk." And basically, David wanted to serve him, and he wanted M to live with him in his kingdom and in his palace. And so David rebuked the servant, and he was like, "Haven't you read the scriptures? Open your mouth for the speechless." Now, that part just means that the speechless are people who cannot talk. So if you're seeing someone who cannot talk, but you know what they're saying and somebody else doesn't understand them, it is your job to stand up and be like, "Okay, this is what the person is trying to tell you." You basically become their tongue. You basically speak for them because they cannot speak. So David, he defended M and he was like, "No, he needs someone to take care of him. He needs someone to help him because he cannot walk, he cannot do anything, he's a handicap." So then David gave orders that M would sit with him at the royal table, okay, in his palace, and he would be living in one of David's palaces. Like instead of, the village that he was living at and him being by himself, now he's living with King David, Saul's son, who is the enemy of King David. So then M bowed down to David and he was like, "I'm your servant and I can do whatever you want me to do." But David said to him, "Do not fear, you will be honored and you will live with me all your life." So, a little bit of a recap. Why did David want to show kindness to Saul's son? Again, he remembered the verse that is, "If your enemy is hungry, feed him." Okay, the enemy is Saul's descendant, who is Saul's son, right? So Saul wanted to kill David. So technically speaking, Saul's son would be David's enemy, but David saw that maybe Saul's son needed help, and he realized that he did need help because he was lame, and he did not leave him. He's going to care for him, and he's going to be with him the whole time. He's going to serve him. Okay. What is the name of Saul's son? Again, it's the very long name, Mephibosheth, who is just M in this story. What is the verse that David obeyed when he showed kindness to Saul's son? Again, we said the verse. What did the servant say to David in secret? He told him, "You don't have to help this man. Just give him money, shoo him away. You don't need to help him. He doesn't need to be with you. You don't know what he can do to you after. And what did M do when he was brought to David? He bowed down to him and he said, I want to be your servant, or I will be your servant. But at the end of the day, David did not even think about, seeking revenge on Saul's descendants, or even be like, okay, like he's done. He's dead. I don't have to think about him. I don't have to think about any one of his families. And I could just, avoid all of his members, and just so that I don't get killed. But he didn't, because at the end of the day, he still respected Saul, and he still loved him, even if he was his enemy. And even on top of that, he wanted to help any of his family members who needed help, who was M. So the whole point of this, I know this might seem like it's a very old story, and we don't have kings and palaces and anything right now, but we do have a lot of people who are in need. Maybe they're in need of helping walk, they're in need of helping write, they're in need of helping, to communicate with people and to speak. They're in need of, eating if their arms are not, if they have a certain disability. And it is your job to, even if you may seem like you do not like that person and you don't want to get close to that person, no matter what, if you just show a small act of kindness, Christ will reward you for it. And he will be very, very happy with your very small act of kindness, even if it's just like tiny, even if it's just like, someone cannot pick up their pencil and they just like want to put it somewhere else, and you just take the pencil and you're like, oh yeah, like, here you go. Or someone who dropped anything on the floor but they can't bend down because they have like a back problem or anything like that, you pick their stuff up for them. Just like a little bit of an example, sometimes now you could be thinking, but I don't go outside anymore and I don't see people and I can't help anyone. That's true, but you could also help your parents at home and your siblings with anything, homework, cleaning up your room, or helping your parents clean up, anything like that. Also small acts of kindness. So that was basically our lesson for us today. And I'm really glad that I get to speak with you guys, and if there's anything, we're always reachable. And thank you, and I hope you guys really enjoy your day and this weekend. Bye guys.